name is Shari Hollett. I'm based out of Toronto. I am a theater creator. I work a lot with my life partner and artistic partner, Chris Earle. We started a company called The Night Kitchen many moons ago in Toronto, which gave us an opportunity to create and produce and act and write in our own work. I have also worked with The Second City, which is comedy theater, world-renowned comedy theater, I think is the tagline. And I have worked with them for, this is the 31st year. What? That's the audition I wasn't going to go to. So there's the first life hack. When your agent says, I really want you to go to this, it seems perfect for you, and you're like, no. Sometimes they know something you don't. So that's good. That's good that I went to that audition and, started a 31-year relationship with both the theater and that guy, Chris. So yeah, I'm a writer. I'm a director. I'm a dramaturge. As I said, I create, I produce. I mostly really enjoy directing original works. So that's a big part of my like. I have done, things like The Crime of Miss Jean Brodie up at Canadore. You Are Here from pal Daniel McIver, who's awesome, brilliant guy. But I do really, really enjoy working with people on first-time scripts. It's one of my things for sure. And that's kind of the lowdown.
You have clearly a lot of insight, and it's very interesting to hear. So you're an artist who wears many hats: writer, director, actor, dramaturge, workshop instructor, and teacher. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about where your journey began? What started you down the path to being primarily a self-producing artist?
Yeah, I went to a Halloween party in my very early 20s, and I met a really cool director, and she told me she was about to start doing this improvised soap opera. And I said, oh my God, I love improv. I love improvising, having never improvised before. So some might call that lying. I call it improvising. That led to this improvised soap opera that we performed every week. And actually we went to Yale and we're part of an international competition of improv sketch troupes. This is way before I knew what Second City even was. So that was kind of a big start because improv is writing on your feet, right? So Svetlana's Island was her name, and she created this project, and I got to create, that kind of began the creative collaboration aspect of my work, which is most of my work, that there's an element of collaboration. Improv, of course, is completely collaborative. So after doing the soap for a while, as I said earlier, my agent was like, oh, you should audition for The Second City. And I was like, no, thank you very much. And then they were like, what are you talking about? Don't be an idiot. Like, you're funny and, you're this and you're that. And I had an image in my mind of what people who worked at Second City were. And I had decided that that's not what I was. So we often, for ourselves, pigeonhole us when other people aren't. And I think that was a perfect example of that. I was like, I'm not quirky enough. I'm not this enough. How many times has an actor started a sentence with, I'm not this blank enough? And I coach a lot of actors, so I know how much that is a common theme. And I know that I did that too. So yeah, I got over that and started just really working with people, like I said, in a collaborative way. And that led Chris and I to then start our own company. Oh, but before that, I wanted to go to the Edmonton Fringe. I had heard so much about the Edmonton Fringe. There was no Fringe in Toronto yet. So I approached two of my girlfriends who were just amazing actors, and none of us had written before. And I said, let's write a show. Let's get into the Edmonton Fringe. Let's get the brilliant Ken McDougall to direct it and take the train out. What do we have to lose? So we did that. and it was with Caroline Gillis, who's an amazing actress from out east, does a lot of stuff with MacIver, and Martha Cronin, yes, related to Hume Cronin. And the three of us wrote this show called I'd Never Give an Acrylic Scarf to the Man I Love. And Sky Gilbert, who used to run Buddies and Bad Times Theatre in Toronto, said to us, you have to come up with a really good name. Like, it's so easy to disappear at the Fringe, especially Edmonton Fringe, like whatever. And so I said really sarcastically, okay, well, maybe we'll just call ourselves Women with Large Breasts Juggling. Do you think that'll be good? And he laughed and he went, yeah. And so that's what we called ourselves. And that was so not a description that would be appropriate at all to us. So obviously we were being funny.
Yeah.
And when we got there, we had all these interviews lined up. So we ended up selling out our first show. Now there was another company that called themselves Sex on Plywood. It didn't have the same impact. So I'm not suggesting that just come up with an outlandish, I don't know, maybe because it came from a place that was pure, that I was like, oh, we have to do something ridiculous, so we'll do this, rather than what's something ridiculous. You know, it was kind of like I grabbed the first thing. I'm a big believer in that idea of creating from abundance. But sometimes it's actually just the first thing. And that was the first thing. So that kind of launched the experience of collaborating with people, having no idea whether anybody would come to your show. And if they would they like walk out or hate it? And we sold out the first show and we did really well. And that was my introduction to the Fringe. And it was like, what? It was shocking and thrilling. You know, I've done probably over 20 Fringe shows, so that has not been every experience, but that was the first and in a way, I guess the most important, because we had no idea what to expect. That was a long answer, wasn't it?
That was a fantastic answer. Wow. Okay. So, on the note of Second City, you joined back in 1990 working with the touring company and establishing programs. How did your role evolve over the years and what have you learned in your time with Second City?
So I just want to clarify that I'm understanding the question correctly with the establishing programs. So are you referring to when I was the artistic director of the training center, or are you referring to something else?
The former, yes.
When I was the artistic director.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I did much later in my relationship with Second City. I can tell you exactly when I did it. That was 98 because that's when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to still be really involved with Second City, but I wanted to do it in a way that worked for me. So that role didn't exist yet in Second City. There wasn't an artistic director for the training center. There had been kind of an overseer, like an artistic director who like checked in once a month or whatever. But I was like, no, this is a full-time gig. Like somebody should be doing this, overseeing faculty, introducing new classes, fly me down to Chicago, let me look at everything they're doing there and then grab the best and then kind of, you know, see what we've got here, talk to all the wonderful teachers. And that's, you know, I introduced the Conservatory Program, which has become a huge, huge thing in Toronto for people here. Like a lot of the people that have ended up on main stage went through the Conservatory. So that was kind of thrilling. But initially, yeah, it was the touring company, and then I was in the London resident company, and then kind of early put my foot in the water of teaching. And, you know, at that time, it was kind of like, I have a level D on Friday. Do you want it? Because I can't make it because I have an audition or I'm shooting or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, what do you teach in level D? Oh, you know. And that was like, you'll figure it out. It was everything about that place I've been in situations where it seems like well, even back to the party that was pre-Second City, figuring it out as I went, which is, of course, what improv is anyway. But that was also happening in the things I was doing. And I'd say that about directing, too. The first time I directed something was students of mine, and they wanted to do comedy duo stuff around town, but it was like sketch stuff, and there weren't a lot of female duos. This at the time, Alana Harkin, who is on, the Samantha Bee show now, but Samantha Bee and Alana Harkin were in a trio, and these gals wanted to do a duo. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just figure that out. So kind of, I always talk about Harold and the Purple Crayon. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay. It's an amazing series of children's books. Actually, when we went to the Yale Festival, they called the Yale improv team was the Purple Crayons. And it was inspired by Harold and the Purple Crayon. And Harold just draws the world that becomes the world he's in. So look him up after. I always tell my improv students to look him up, because Harold just creates everything in front of you with a purple crayon. That's what we're doing when we're improvising. I think often with directing as well, you've got the text, or sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're building it and working with the writer. And the world kind of starts to become clear as you get in there. I'm not the kind of person that goes in with it all figured out. I've worked with directors like that. They're already seeing the blocking. And, so it's not that I don't have ideas sometimes, but for me, it's about that collaboration. When the actors start speaking the words, that's when I get the ideas. And then when we get up on our feet and we start working on it, that's when I also start getting ideas, design-wise, lighting-wise, sound-wise, and, what it should look like. And it just all starts like the purple crayon. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I'll have to look into that later. The idea of kind of constructing your entire reality as you go.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't talked a ton yet about Night Kitchen, a theater company that you co-founded with the goal of producing intelligent, provocative, accessible theater with an emphasis on satire and dark comedy. Can you tell me about forming that company and what it means to you now?
Yeah, what that was Chris and I both having come out of Second City, and also both having had kind of a lot of indie theater experience. We were in the same city doing, we didn't meet for a while in that community, but we were doing similar things. We were working with smaller companies doing original shows. He was in the Winnipeg Fringe. I was in the Edmonton Fringe. We hadn't met yet. Then we both did Second City. And after Second City, we were really anxious to get back to that kind of theater we both started in, which was that indie theater. So we thought, I know, let's just create one. It'll be our theater. And then we will take turns writing a show. You'll write a show, I'll dramaturge and direct, and then I'll write a show and you'll dramaturge and direct, and we'll see how that goes. And basically where that came from was one day I was over at his place and we were organizing, cleaning up, and I found a box of writing, essays from school. And Chris is American. And I pulled out an essay that he wrote when he was 7, and it was Why I Want to Be President. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever read because of how earnest it was, in the way only a 7-year-old can be, right? It was kind of beautiful, but kind of also funny now that you're not 7, right? So I picked that up and I said, we have to produce a play that this essay's in, and you have to write it. And that was our first show that we did with the Night Kitchen. It was called The Proceedings, and it was actually about, loosely based on a character's reaction to the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings, which is quite a leap from that essay. But there's a scene where myself and brilliant Tim Sims, who was my director at Second City, and he was acting in it with me, we're playing 2 teachers reading the essay and mocking it. In a way, only a certain kind of character can, right? A little bit like this, right? And Chris played basically himself. And I was playing basically a character that was inspired by his mother, who was this amazing woman who was never shy with her opinions and writing letters to people who needed to get them, especially in the government. So that was what that play was about, the proceedings. And that came out of that essay. So you just never know where the stories are going to come from.
Interesting. What a fun place for inspiration to strike too, just finding that in an old box.
Yeah. And before that, he hadn't written before. I just said, you have to write, because it was also really well written. You know, it was very well thought out. It was very considered, and it was hilariously and sweetly earnest. So yeah, and like I said, though, in Second City, we were writing for years. We were creating entirely original shows. We never wrote them down. Somebody else did that. We just made them up, you know, on the stage. So I guess part of it was we both gained a certain confidence doing that in front of an audience for several years. So then the idea was, let's actually create a play. We can use improv as part of how we develop it. And the best place to do that, which I know is leading into your next question, is the Fringe, because you can take risks.
You, my friend, have set me up for the perfect slam dunk. A lot of your plays have premiered at Fringe festivals.
Yeah.
Did the Fringe experience impact you as an artist? What were the benefits and what were the struggles?
Well, it completely impacted me as an artist. Completely. Because it gives you a safety net. You're part of this festival that is its own living, breathing thing. And then you get to be, you know, a piece of that puzzle that all comes together. And like I said, you don't know where you're going to fit. You don't know you could be, you know, in a venue that's got really bad times, and for some reason people don't like your title, and whatever happens, and you're just starting out and you haven't established yourself and nobody comes. Or you can be somebody that nobody knows and you haven't established yourself, but somebody comes early and then they tell a bunch of somebody else's. And we had that experience. We were really lucky. Like, the Proceedings was our first show together at the Fringe, and we got a really early great review, which has happened to us a lot. We've been very lucky. When we did Radio 30 at the New York Fringe, we got chosen as one of 2 people to have an excerpt in the New York Times, the Sunday New York Times, or as Chris called it, the New York fucking Times, because we couldn't believe it. We were like heads blown right off bodies. So that kind of gives you a leg up. You have people wanting to see your show, right? And then we also went and did that. We did that because we did it in Toronto, and somebody from HBO just happened to pick our show to go to, and they saw it, and then they asked us to fly to California and showcase it for some other people involved with HBO and the Aspen Festival. And we said, no, we're sorry, we can't do that. Not because we're idiots, but because we were parents of small children. And well, at that time it was just our son. No, Lucy was 1. Yeah, we had 2 children. We couldn't just like fly off to LA to showcase. And we were like, but we can give you a really crappy recording of it. We have the worst recording of it. So if you want to play that for people and then they're interested, great. And at that point, I'd also heard about several people I knew in the community who had kind of had that carrot dangled, and they went and they had a great time. And I mean, it's LA, right? And exciting people are coming to see your show. And then they came home, and that was the end of that story. So we were like, just not in a position to do that as a family. So we didn't do that, and they played the crappy recording. And I mean, Radio 30 is one of my favorite things that we've done. And they knew pretty quickly, but I honestly felt the fact that we said, no, just look at our work and then tell us if you want us, actually piqued their curiosity. That's what I always felt, because there's a lot of jump how high in this business, and we weren't playing with them. This was coming from a place of integrity. It was not practical for us to do this. It would have been us trying to please too much and neglecting our own responsibilities. And I don't know if it would have worked out the same way. Maybe it would have, probably would have, I don't know. But that led to Aspen, right? So that came out of the Fringe. There's some amazing things. Our friends did a little show called The Drowsy Chaperone the same year. A few things came out of that. So, the Fringe can just take you so many cool places. So there's a lot of the positives. The negatives are way less than the positives. I'm going to just say that, in my opinion, right out there, because there's so many positives. But we did a tour of Radio 30 across the country. And again, we got really lucky because we started in Toronto and it had already been a hit in Toronto and it had won a bunch of awards and we'd gone to Aspen and all that stuff. So there was a lot of buzz when we brought it back. And it was 14 years later that we brought it back, right? So that was like, there were people that wanted to see it that had, there were still some. And CBC Winnipeg, where we were going next, already kind of got an interview from somebody in Toronto that they put on CBC. So we got advance buzz before we got there. But when we got to Calgary and Edmonton, we didn't get reviewed till later. And so we had to work harder to get those audiences in. And then we got them in, and then we got a Best of the Fringe, and we got extended, and, wonderful things happened. But at the beginning, we were just another one of many, many shows. And that can be really tough for people. We just took our poster and taped it on a T-shirt and, walked around the beer tent like that. We flyered lines. We were with our kids in Winnipeg. Well, our son was in the show with Chris, and our daughter, they were handing out flyers. It was a family Von Trapp affair, totally. Lucy would go, and hear people before the show talking, and then she would tell us what she heard, and, it was we had spies.
That is so adorable.
Yeah. And Lucy and I did a show at the Fringe too. I don't know if you know that. I wrote a play for Lucy and I called For the Record that we did at the Toronto Fringe 2016. It was when she finished high school and she was going off to Montreal. And I'd been wanting to write a play for a long time that was kind of inspired by the music of my adolescence, because the music of our adolescence, of course, is the best music ever and will always be. I'm just a little bit older. I'm going to tell you that the songs that they're going to stay, and they're just, So I had read a book about why music affects us so much at that age. And it has to do with how much your brain develops at that time. So like middle school, crazy. First year in middle school, crazy. So that music has such an emotional connection. So I wanted to write a play and I had lost my mother, and I wanted to write about it, but I could not write about that for years. It was too painful. Because she was young. It was not, what we ever expected. I have great grandmothers who lived in, 104. And so, that was not what was expected. And suddenly I kind of realized I could find a way to finally explore that subject as I was a mother about to see her daughter move away, so that there was a separation coming. And then I could write about, this big painful separation that happened when I lost my mother. And the play took place in a record store, and we started back in the garage, and you just hear us having a mother-daughter fight. And everybody, we'd had some good pre-press too, and they knew that it was a real mother-daughter playing a mother and daughter, except I was playing the daughter and Lucy was playing the mother. So we switched it, which people didn't know till I came running into the garage and slammed the door. So that was really fun, and that came out of rehearsal. That's not the way I wrote it. Originally, I was playing the mother, and Lucy was playing, and I was playing other characters from my past, and Lucy was playing herself. And then in rehearsal, I was like, you try being my part. And she was so good. And I'm like my mother, like to be the mother part. And she'd only known my grandmother for a year, her grandmother rather, it was my mother for a year. And she just had her. she just had it down. And so we swapped. And that was a really cool experience because I had people tell me after that they were interested in seeing it and they knew me from other stuff or whatever. And they thought, oh, that's cute, a mother and daughter. But when they heard the fight and then I ran out instead of her, then they were like, oh, I'm excited because it's not what they expected. And people go to the theater for the unexpected. And we don't always know how we're going to give it to them. But we find that. It's like the purple crayon, right? You're drawing. That just happened in rehearsal one day. And it was some of the biggest things in shows have happened like that in a rehearsal.
Wow. So this will actually have to be our last question. I'm being told by my producers that we're running out of time. So my last question for you is, theater isn't your only wheelhouse. You've acted in a number of shows and movies, and in 2019, you directed your own short. Can you tell me what the process of creating Gotcha was like?
That was thrilling. And that was another thing where I was creating something knowing who I was creating it for. So with For the Record, I was writing a show for Lucy and I. With plays that Chris and I wrote, we were writing them for ourselves. With Gotcha, there's a really talented couple I know, and I'd worked with the guy at Second City, Sandy Joe Evans, and his partner, his wife, Kylie Evans, is also fantastic. And to me, they kind of epitomized this couple that could seem like they have it all. And so I thought, and I always thought Lucy would be an excellent ghost. So, and she had played a lot of characters in TV where they were always making her do period things. And she has a timelessness. And I was like, I'm going to write a play. I'm going to write actually a short film where Kylie and Sandy come for a perfect getaway, except for the ghost, which is Lucy. And what's the connection? They don't know. They don't know what the connection to this girl that they're saying is. So that's how that came together. I've never done so many drafts of anything in my life because film is so different from theater. And you don't have that time to figure it out in the rehearsal the same way. You have to figure it out on the page by going back and going back and going back. So I probably did like 10 drafts of that. Whereas with the theater we do a draft, maybe a second draft, and then we get it up on our feet. And then the drafts happen in the process. Film, totally different. And that was really exciting. And shooting it was thrilling. It was a thrilling experience. It was, I've done a few other things since on camera wise like that, and I love it because you have to be incredibly prepared, which is, like I said, a very different way to approach the directing, but you also have to think like an improviser and be ready for anything to go wrong and be able to pivot. So that I found that really served me well and made it insanely exciting. And the visual aspect of it all, figuring things out.
I suppose this is where we have to end the interview, but this was incredibly insightful and very, very, very interesting. I have a lot of homework to go do now as well. Very, very excited.
Oh, good. And listen, Radio 30, we did through the National Arts Center at the beginning of the pandemic. They did a Canada Performs thing. I don't know if you know about that, but it's where they had artists like Jim Cuddy and Elvira Kurt, like comedians, musicians, what have you, put their art up on Facebook Live. And it was produced by them. And so we did Radio 30 with, again, Chris and Sam while in quarantine live on Facebook, and that's still up. So if you go look up Radio 30 on Facebook, you can watch that show done live.
Very exciting. I'll have to do that when we're done here. Okay, thank you very much. Cool.
Really nice to meet you.